Welcome you to our special committee on election integrity committee meeting today. Um, Happy St. Patrick's Day. And we will start as we always do with a word of prayer. And I'm going to ask Representative Bernal if she will lead us, if you'll bow your heads. What number are you, Representative Bernal? 9. Try now. Go ahead. Well, now go ahead. Don't push it. Now go.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we are here today to do your will. This committee has a major task before it. We are asking that you guide us and give us wisdom as we go through these bills. Also, Heavenly Father, please bless the victims' families that were killed yesterday. We thank you for all the many blessings that you have given us, and we ask that you continue to watch over us as we drive home, and that as we complete the last part of the 40 days of this session. These and other blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Bernal. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have in front of you today is Senate Bill 202. As a bill passed over to us by the chairman of the Senate Ethics Committee, Senator Burns. I will, with his permission, explain the original Senate Bill 202, and then I will talk with you about the additions that have been made to it. If you go to section 24, pages 38 and 39, there you will find a requirement for third-party organizations who are sending out absentee ballot applications to voters who have already requested or voted absentee ballots. You will find a prohibition to that. In other words, we are now going to require parties sending out absentee ballot applications to check the daily postings online for who has already voted, who has already applied, and who has already received an absentee ballot. The purpose of that, as I understand it, and as I discussed with the author, was that, as many of you probably have heard and we have talked about in this committee before, there were multiple citizens who said, man, I got 7 absentee ballots, or I got 12. Well, what we seem to think in most situations, they received probably absentee ballot applications, we're pretty sure in most instances. So the idea would be that if you know and can readily check, which you can, an organization that someone has already either voted, already turned in an application, or already received an absentee ballot, that we don't want to continue sending them absentee ballot applications. Probably actually save somebody some money on postage with sending things out. That is the original Senate Bill 202. It falls in line with some earlier things that we did in our legislation, which is also in this bill, and that is making sure that absentee ballot applications are clearly marked as such, with prominent language notifying who it came from and what it was, and requiring obviously a standard form so it would not be confusing any more so than need be. If you now turn to some sections, which I'm going to identify for you, I'll start with some things that we talked about on the House side, but I don't believe was passed, maybe held some hearings on it. If you look at section 8 of your bill, you will see there, regarding the public funding of public elections, a study that we're going to ask the State Board of Elections to create and report back to the legislature as to a possible program so that the State Board of Elections could receive any sorts of donations somebody would like to make to help out elections in Georgia, and they could create an equitable distribution plan around the state as needed, not totally dissimilar from other state agents we have, such as Department of Community Affairs, that doles out various kinds of grants to help with issues in our state. And if you would just make a note of any questions you have, and then when we go through it once, I'll be happy to come back and try to answer any for members of the committee. The next section I would direct you to, as far as something new, as far as on the House side of anything that we passed out, go to section 32 of the bill. We had a lot of discussion about giving things of value to voters once they get within that 150-foot area. What we've added in there is an option that water can be made available in that area. We had some testimony from some of our election directors that talked about elections being held in the summer and liking to be able to do that. This allows you to do that in section 32 of the bill. If you will now look right there where you already are at section 33 of the bill, we also had a good bit of discussion about the problem that we have in Georgia with people voting out of precinct. They have to vote a provisional ballot, which slows down the process for voting and causes a lot of work on election officials, not only to administer it when they get there and slowing down the line, but also later transferring that to a ballot that can be scanned for counting. And we had discussions about someone not being able to get to their regular precinct in time. So what you will see there, before 5 p.m., you will be directed to go to your correct precinct so you can vote. After 5 p.m., if you sign a statement saying that you cannot make it to your precinct, you would be allowed to vote. And once again, you're still going to be disenfranchising half your ballot because generally if you vote out of precinct, you don't vote for the local races and maybe even your state rep or your state senator, but the up ballot races you would be able to. That's section 33. If you now turn to section 50 of the bill, I will describe what is another House ad. Representative Shay Roberts had a bill, House Bill 659, that we have, I would say, begin to incorporate into what you have here. Representative Roberts's bill was going to require that our images, our ballot images, be made publicly available. I think that's a good idea. It is going to take some time to figure that out. Currently, it takes a judge to order someone to be able to view the actual ballot images themselves, because for the longest time in Georgia, that rule dates back to probably when you had paper ballots and they had to be held securely in case there was a recount or other things. Now, because of our system, we actually scan the images and we have the original paper, but we also have the image. And that situation, technology, we believe, can make available. If you want to go to pick your county, Meriwether County, and you want to count the ballots yourself to see how many your county commissioner in District 5 got, you could actually look at those and count them yourself. We know it's going to take some time to get to that point technology-wise. We've got to figure out how the counties would do it. We got to figure out server space, figure out exactly how it would work. So we've done two things to take a step towards Representative Roberts' idea in her bill. Number one, we've asked the Secretary of State to create a pilot program to see how this would work and try it out in some places. And secondly, we have made available now those ballot images to an open records request. Heretofore, like I said, it took a judge to do that, but going forward, it would be available under an open records request. So a step toward the idea of having those online one day where anybody could view them and count them. Now, what I'm going to turn to is the things that we did not pass out of this committee, but the Senate passed out of several of the bills that they sent to us that we have incorporated into Senate Bill 202. Once again, I'll try to go section by section. And if you have any questions, just make a note of it and I'll come back and be happy to try to answer anything that you may have. The Senate sent us two different versions of something I call county accountability. In other words, we know that unfortunately, we have some counties that have regular problems administering their elections. We had hearings in the House in subcommittee on this issue. The Senate sent us a bill by the President Pro Tem there addressing this issue, and they also put a version of addressing this issue in Senate Bill 241 that they sent to us. What you will find in 4 sections of the bill is an implementation of that piece of county accountability, such that if you had somebody who regularly could not run their elections well after a due process with hearings and findings, that the state election board could step in to remedy those situations. Those are sections 2 in the bill, section 5 in the bill, section 6 in the bill, and section 11 in the bill. And basically, here's how the format would work. And we based this very much on, in part, a suggestion by the Association of County Commissioners as how they might like to see it work. And also, we based it upon another area of the law where we do something somewhat similar to this. Most of you are familiar because we talked about it in here, that in the area of school boards that are in trouble, maybe they're about to lose their accreditation, there is a procedure under Georgia law where, after a due process set of hearings and findings, that the governor can step in and do something about the problems with a local school board. And we've seen that happen a few times. And quite often, I believe, at least I know in my area, that school system gets back on their feet and does a better job. So the review could be triggered 3 different ways. It could be because the state of elections board decides to do it themselves, and they're the ones that hear problems regularly with counties, so you would think they would be familiar with that. It could be from a county commissioner in the county in question, and it also could be by members of the legislature. If you're in a small or average sized county, it'd take a House member and take a Senate member to trigger the beginning of that investigatory process. If you're a larger county, we would say 2 House members and 2 senators. Those details are right there in the bill. The next area that I'll bring your attention to, and everything I'm talking about now are things that came to us from the Senate and the various bills that they sent us, is section 7 of the bill. In section 7 of the bill, we have incorporated a portion of Senate Bill 241. That is whereby any settlement entered into by the state of Georgia regarding elections, there would need to be notice given to the judiciary committees of the House and the Senate 5 days before that is entered into. As y'all are, I'm sure, aware, the Attorney General in Georgia represents the state, has the authority under our Constitution and laws to settle a lawsuit. And what we would be doing is, obviously we cannot take that away, but we would now be having notice made to the legislative committees, which would appropriately handle similar matters. And as y'all know, those of you that have served as committee chairs or do, you get quite often notices from various agencies notifying the committee and legislative leaders about various matters that happen in the state of Georgia. If you now move on to section 14 of the bill, section 14. When we had the unique situation in Georgia with a January the 5th runoff and it being a 9-week runoff, there was a possibility for people to register to vote after the November election and before the runoff. As we have had an existing Georgia law for as long as I can remember, if you think someone registered to vote, but they were not properly registered in the state of Georgia or should not be, there's a method whereby that could be challenged. That happened fairly seldom. It happened a lot more in the last election. And what section 14 does is clarify how that process works, sets time limits, sets the number of people that could possibly have questions drawn about their registration and how many one could question, and also puts in the ability for the State Board of Elections to step in with clear authority to adjudicate problems if that is not done properly. That is section 14 of the bill. Section 16 of the bill, that is another Senate provision out of a bill that they sent to us. And most of this is from Senate Bill 241 that I will mention. Right now, our Secretary of State's office does belong to an entity, and the acronym is ERIC, and they are a method whereby several states come together. And if I move from Georgia to South Carolina and register to vote there, South Carolina notifies Georgia that I no longer should be on the rolls in the state of Georgia because I've registered in another state. This simply says that not only do we know that's going on currently, but in the future we will belong to such organizations. That's section 16 of the bill. Section 18 of the bill is a bill passed by Senator Merritt in the Senate that deals with Senate Bill 253 that was sent to us that we have incorporated into this version of the bill, requiring the posting of notices when precincts are moved. A real good common sense idea that goes on, I think, or should go on, but this will make it law that those postings must be required, and that's Senator Merritt's Senate Bill 253. Next, if you would turn over in the section 24, actually, we'll still be, go to section 24 of the bill. There was talk and questions in this committee, and the Senate put it in the bill that they sent over to us, whereby if a person were in jail but awaiting trial, how would they possibly deal with identification for the purposes of voting? I checked with my sheriff. There's a process in place there, but what we do in section 24, page 37, is actually put that into law, that if you are in that situation, you will have access to any personal effects, including identification, you need to allow for voting. Bless you. If you now turn to section 25 of the bill, this deals with secure containers, sometimes referred to as drop boxes. Here in the bill, we simply clarify language that was already in the House bill as far as where these containers need to be located. There is a typo in that area. The House language that we passed, whereby every county would be required to have one, and larger counties would have multiples of that, depending on how large they were. That will be included back in the version of the bill that you will see when we meet later on this Senate Bill 202. If you will now turn over to section 27 of the bill, section 27. This is another add from a Senate provision sent to us. It would require the posting of absentee ballots and advanced voting numbers each day for or for early voting. This would not be a change in practice. It was something that is being done already, but now we would actually require that as mandatory in our code rather than it just being the standard operating procedure. Also, now if you look on page, section 29 of the bill, section 29, there was a good bit of discussion about the Secretary of State's ability to audit absentee ballot applications and the envelopes they came in. There was some discussion that the Secretary of State could. There was some discussion that they would have to have a complaint before they could do that. From a Senate bill passed to us, the add in section 29 would clearly state that the Secretary of State does have the ability to audit absentee ballot applications and envelopes for 2 years after an election. Next, another Senate add, because that's what we're going through now, section 30 of the bill. Section 30 of the bill deals with judges' orders regarding elections. Judges have always had the ability, if needed, to order that polling locations stay open later. This simply puts some guidelines in there for that action. It says that there needs to be a good cause evidentiary standard, that the polling location would be left open for the amount of hours that it was actually closed for whatever reason earlier in the morning, usually. That it would not be open past 9 p.m. unless the Superior Court judge enters specific findings of why it is necessary to accommodate that location by staying open past 9 p.m. If you next look at section 35 of the bill, section 35. one of the bills that was introduced on the House side, and I believe also on the Senate side, was a bill dealing with what is I commonly refer to as the denominator um, number when we're talking about how many people voting. And that is a requirement that we be told on a county by county basis how many people voted by 10 p.m., not who they voted for. That's the actually tabulation of who got how many votes, but the denominator of how many people actually voted. That was something that was in the Senate bill sent over to us, 241. And also there was a House bill by Representative Jones, I believe, worked on language for that. That is there in section 35. If you look at section 36, and also similar language to accomplish what I'm about to explain to you will be in section 39 and 40. This is language requiring the continuous counting of votes until they're finished. We all know that Fulton County had an issue with the stopping and starting of counting votes. Part of that problem we hope we've already resolved in the legislation that we've already passed and hopefully will become law, whereby we do things, early tabulation and getting early processing going of those absentee ballots. That was contained both Democrat and Republican bills in the House and Senate, and it came over to us. This simply says, hopefully now that we have resolved needing to go to 2 a.m. to count votes, once you start, we're going to ask you to continue counting until you're finished. That is section 36, 39, and 40 in the bill in front of you. Now I'll move to section 47 in the bill. This is another, of course, as we're discussing now, Senate legislation that came over to us that they passed. This clarifies that you can take a person to assist you into the polls to help you, or your children, they can go with you. But other than that, no one else is to intentionally try to see how you vote in the process, and it makes that a crime if that is done. Ladies and gentlemen, those are what I have given to you, the new provisions that are in addition to the bill that we passed out of the House, and where they came from and background on it. I'd be happy now if anybody on the committee has any questions about the different areas that I discussed to try to answer some questions for you. Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that explanation. However, I just have a little bit of concern because when we were presenting House Bill 531, Chairman Powell made the comment that we should have been trying to work together, and I don't see how we are, because last Thursday, we received an email from a Cobb superintendent, and it was the substitute for 241 and HB 531. And she made comments on it and everything. And then when I asked my whip about it, he didn't know anything about it. And so we wouldn't have known that this even existed if she hadn't made any comments. And so I'm just trying to understand the process here of how we're doing things, because maybe I just don't remember, but I know I was in subcommittee when Todd Jones presented his bill, and I asked him some questions, but I don't ever remember us voting on that bill. So are we just like taking bills? And the same thing with Representative Roberts. So are we just taking bills piece by piece and just kind of putting them in when we want to? I just want to know the process so I can understand. Thank you.
First of all, we won't do anything until the committee votes on it. What you have in front of you is a proposed substitute, and that's why we're here to discuss it, ask questions. So the committee will make the ultimate decision about what we do or don't do. Now, you mentioned several things in there. One of them was Todd Jones's bill. I am not positive if it was passed out of subcommittee or not, but there were bills passed to us out of the Senate that dealt with that issue of what I call denominator language. So it has been debated in the legislature in part, and now it will be before this committee, and you'll have to decide if you want to include it in there. Regarding election directors receiving versions of bills that the legislature may have or have not worked on. If I think I heard the number that there have been 80 bills introduced this session, maybe about 20 by Democrats and the rest by Republicans. So there have been multiple bills introduced. If you look at the LC number on the bill in front of you, it's LC 280325S. Now, what that LC number means, the LC stands for Legislative Council 28. LC stands for the Legislative Council. Number 28 stands for the attorney who drafted it. And 025, I think, means how many bills he has drafted on various issues dealing with these subject matters. And that would be 325. So you can probably multiply that by a big number and come up with thousands of different versions of bills that have come out, and various people, including me and maybe you and other legislators, depending on what the issue is, we send those various versions out to people to have them look at it and get their opinion. Now, one thing that you know, Representative, because you've been in these hearings when we've done it often, is that we have invited election directors to review what we're doing, give us comments, and many of the changes that we have made and are making are because they have told us that it would work better. So I am welcoming of the fact that somebody sent a draft of something to an election director and sought their comments on it. So that is what I think probably happened. I think the Cobb election director was probably even one of the election directors that came and testified to our committee about things that they wanted and things that would help, many of which, as I've said many times, are incorporated into what we passed in the House, and also some of the work they did on the Senate side. So your question had multiple parts to it, and my answer also had multiple parts to it, but I tried to address everything that you mentioned. Yes, ma'am. Other questions or comments from any members of the committee? All right, the chair doesn't see any now. We will have another. Oh, Representative Smyer, I'm sorry, sir. Did you want to press your button one more time? All right, quick precedent. Now go.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I was just, I was trying to, I got this today and I was trying to go through it. Do you have for our disposal the difference between the original SB 202 and what has been posed in here as a committee sub? Is, I know you.
Yes, sir. You unfortunately, as I do some, in fact, I was late today myself. I went over that when we started, but I can tell you exactly where it is. You look in section 24 of the bill on page 38 and 39. The original portion of 202 was about organizations sending absentee ballot applications to people who had already voted or already applied. And it says that you have to check basically to make sure that the publicly offered information that they have not already applied or already voted. If so, you should not send them an absentee ballot application. Okay. That's section 24 of the bill, pages 38 and 39. Okay.
One other thing, in terms of how we, how we go from here is will the public and others have an opportunity, the election of directors? I know we've been in contact with them, but will there be any kind of public testimony or any Zoom testimony on this bill as we have it today as a committee sub? Do you anticipate that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, we have 4 that have signed up today that I intend to hear. We also will have a hearing tomorrow, very likely, I think, in 2 o'clock. That's when we have the room. We'll have a hearing tomorrow, which will also take testimony. And as I have done in the past, is any committee member has somebody that they want to testify via Zoom, if you'll just give me their name, we'll make sure that we have them.
Well, you got into the meat of my
Yes, sir.
what I was getting to. Then 202, we're going to just hear it today and maybe come back tomorrow and have additional testimony.
That's correct. Yes, sir. And if you have somebody you definitely want us to get to, if you give me their name, we'll make sure we do that.
Okay.
You or any other members of the committee.
Can I get them in April?
In April? Yeah, you can bring them right. You can bring them right here in April. Now, I'm not sure who'll be here with you,
Yeah,
but
that's
you can
what
bring them right here in April.
You got my
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Representative Burnout, did you have another question, ma'am? All right, press your button and then take your finger away. Now, there
Thank you,
go.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I add someone to the list today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you want me to give you their name?
Yeah,
now?
just if you can you write on a piece of paper and pass it to
Okay.
our attorney right behind you. Be fine. Any other questions from any members of the committee? All right. We do have some folks signed up. Kevin Jochin. And pronounce your last name for me. I apologize. I do the best I can with them, but
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Huachin, pronounced like HWA, Huachin.
gotcha. Good to have you. Tell us who you're with and we'd be happy to hear from you.
I'm a community organizer from the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights Action Network. I'm from Tifton, Georgia. And today I was prepared to talk about SB 241. We were following the different legislative changes announced on the General Assembly website throughout the day, and come to find out that the bill passed in the Senate went from 2 pages to a substitute that is a proposal of 93 pages for SB 202, right? So I'm not going to be speaking about SB 241 anymore, because I think it's really important to talk about how we need to provide a space and time for organizations and community members, to investigate this substitute and see how it impacts communities of color, voters of color. I already see on section 32 that, and just sitting here in my seat, I already see on section 32 that nonprofit organizations aren't some of those groups or bodies that are included in the training process, or who are allowed to train people for poll monitoring. I think that that's something really important to talk about, because during the last elections, we have seen that nonprofit organizations take their members to perform this this duty, right, as civilians, as keepers of the vote, right? I think it's important to be transparent in this process and to not have this process done behind closed doors. Let people be privy of such drastic changes to legislative proposals so that we can dissect the information and see how it impacts voters of color. So I just ask that you not vote on this substitute to be included, or on this bill today. And that's it.
Request granted.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. James Woodall. Good to see you again. Please tell us who you're with and we'll be happy to hear from you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. Reverend James Woodall, State President for the Georgia NAACP. I'm very concerned as to a number of things. One, of course, as many of the members of this committee have shared already, and members of the community, is that we literally just got this an hour ago. And the changes that are included in here are not only racist, but are very indicative of where we are as a state. And quite frankly, as we've watched over the past 24 hours, the impact that the lack of community solidarity has on the lives of our citizens. And so I'll start by addressing 4 provisions in this substitute. One is section 14, lines 571 through 72. And this section particularly is concerning to me because we watched an election cycle where tens of thousands of eligible Georgia voters were not only challenged for their eligibility to be able to participate literally 2 days before an election. We talk about voter confidence. The very first page of this text talks about trying to improve voter confidence 2 days before an election. And we're currently right now considering a substitute to this bill that says there should not be a limit on the number of persons whose qualifications such elector may challenge. I don't recall a single instance in that process that was legitimate, nor voters were considered to actually have committed voter fraud. But right now, in this piece of legislation, we're legitimizing falsehoods that continue to disenfranchise African Americans and people of color all over this state. Secondly, Section 40. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the scanning of posting digital images and open records requests in the pilot program. To date, I have yet to still see an official fiscal analysis on how much this legislation is going to cost. Section 32, 1801 to 1802, poll workers providing orders. Again, there still has not been a fiscal analysis on this legislation. And in fact, if we're going to mandate that poll workers include water, then that means they're not actually doing their job of ensuring that voters are actually voting. Again, goes back to the question of voter confidence. If we don't have poll workers to work the polls and instead they're given water, that means they're not doing the job that they've been called to do. Finally, I'll just end by saying Georgia does not have Republican voters. We don't have Democratic voters. We only have voters. And right now, this is something that's going to not only impact the Democratic turnout, but also Republican turnout. And so we're standing here on behalf of not just, the NAACP, but all voters across this state to say that this process has not been efficient. It does not improve voter confidence. And in fact, will lead to greater consequence for those who are proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Woodall. We appreciate you coming today. All right, James Williams. Mr. Williams, thank you for coming today. Good to have you. Please tell us who you're with, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
I'm James Williams. I'm with the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council. And I want to thank you, Chairman Fleming, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify today. On behalf of the labor movement, dropping this bill an hour before the committee hearing is unacceptable. It's a 93-page bill, and passing this bill sends a message to this chamber and to our members that our voices are not being heard. You're undermining the political system in Georgia by dropping this an hour before the committee hearing and giving us very little time to read through the bill and testify. And as the gentleman before me spoke, there has been no litigation, no court testimony, no evidence that was admitted in court.
Mr. Williams, you heard me say to Kevin earlier that we would not be voting on this.
I understand that, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
But
you
I'm
heard
still
that.
speaking out against this bill.
I understand. Go ahead.
Because it disenfranchises the hundreds of thousands of union members we have in the state that want to use the legitimate system to express themselves in the political forum in voting. And so, yeah, I know you guys are going to be having testimony on it tomorrow, and you guys are most likely going to be voting on it tomorrow, but I would just like to express from the hundreds of thousands of labor members and their families in the state of Georgia that we are expressly against this legislation. And that is all I have.
Sure.
Sure.
Representative.
My friendly
No.
question.
No,
As the chair said, I mean, he introduced the bill, most of the language,
Mhm.
and I realized you saw it an hour ago. I saw it when I sat down at the desk.
Yeah.
Look myself, but most of the language is in prior bills. I think a great part of it is in 351,
yes.
or sorry, 531. There's too many numbers floating around here. At some point, one has to put a bill out and then have hearings.
Mhm.
I mean, we could have put the bill out an hour and then not had hearings till last week and or next week. And so I understand if I try never to do that in my committee, and Chairman Dean of the House, Chairman Smiley sits with me in higher ed, a senior member there. We try never to do that with a substitute and do it. And that's not what the chair is doing here. So, I mean, you have the question, I guess I'm trying to get, more of a statement is, your point's well heard if we were to come in here and go, here it is, and we're voting on it today.
Yeah.
But at some point, there has to be an introduction, and then you start hearing from people about it. And that process is going on. So I look forward to your time to look at the bill and get with me about specifics on the bill.
Yeah, we'll be looking on it through the night, and we'll be here tomorrow at the 2 o'clock hearing. to
And
testify
we'll be
against
here
it as
next
well.
week as well.
All right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Burnell, did you have a question for the?
I just have a statement and all due
Okay, hold
respect.
on 1 second. Mr. Williams, we appreciate you coming today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Representative
thank you. Sorry
Burnell,
about that.
go
And
ahead.
all due respect to Chairman Martin, but he is right. I mean, we got the bill an hour before. And whether we had knew what's in HB 531 or not, it's also a combination of SB 241. And I know I haven't been down here a long time, but I thought that I've been in enough committees that when the bill is coming over from the Senate, that the senator presents it. And so we've gotten no presentation from the senator. This is you telling us that you all decided to combine the two and then telling us what parts are in there, but we haven't heard anything from the senator. So I just want to know, is this a different procedure than the other committees that I'm in? Because something's not right.
Well, Representative, in answer to your question, the senator is here, and he and I discussed beforehand if he would like me to explain the portions of his original bill, and he agreed to do that and said that was fine. And that's the way we handled it. And I've been in many committees where a substitute is initially brought into it, and the person bringing the substitute does most of the explaining, and that's what we did today. Any other questions? We do have a couple of more speakers. Chris Bruce, Mr. Bruce.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Andrea Young with the ACLU of Georgia. We'd like to defer till tomorrow.
Yeah, can you take your mask off if you don't mind?
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Hi, Andrea
Yes,
Young,
ma'am.
Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia. We'd like to defer our comments till tomorrow.
That's fine.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're very welcome. And Representative Burnell, you added Cindy Battles to our list. Is Miss Battles here? Is Miss Battles? Yeah, there she is. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Good afternoon.
Tell us who you're with, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
My name is Cindy Battles, and I am the Policy and Engagement Director with the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. So I think it's probably obvious at this point, because it is true that this Tolstoy piece of legislation, and I say that because it's long, complicated, has tragic consequences, and makes me want to drink. We've
Vodka?
spoken out in most in
Did you
a
hear
number
my
of
question?
sections.
Is it vodka you want to drink?
Hmm?
Is it vodka you want to drink?
I'll drink vodka, prefer bourbon,
It
because
would-
vodka makes me want to fight, and that would be really bad
Well,
right now.
With Tolstoy, vodka would be best. But go ahead.
I'm
Go
aware
ahead.
that he's
Okay.
Russian and it's
All right.
vodka. So you know what else I'm aware of is they don't like people who vote in Russia either. So let's talk a little bit about what I've been able to read so far. And I would like to add my protestations to the ones that have already been said, because we did get this version of an omnibus 241 that we worked on all weekend, and then we didn't hear anything else about it. And then we get what was originally a 2-page bill and is now a 94-page bill. It does change things. It does add things. And to read 94 pages, despite the fact that there's familiar language in there, and really understand what it does is complicated. It's complicated for y'all. It's complicated for us. Therefore, it's got to be complicated for the voters and for the county election officials who are going to have to make this work. And if I'm not mistaken, county election officials have asked y'all to slow down and to wait, to really study the impact of what you're expecting them to do and what the best practices would be. I'm going to go through a couple of sections here. Okay, sorry. I just lost my spot. Okay. So the change for out of precinct provisional ballots, there is actually a less labor intensive way to cure out of precinct provisional ballots. It's very similar to the process that we have now. What you're asking voters and poll workers to do is unnecessarily complicated and is going to create confusion and more work on election day. Section 14, There should be an express provision that requires compliance with the NVRA, because as it is right now, you are out of compliance and breaking federal law. Section 16 about Eric, again, you need to make sure that you're in compliance with the NVRA. Section 24 still retains the 11-day cutoff period, even though you, Chair Fleming, have said that you're willing to change that to an 8-day period. And then the bill, the 202 bill should, direct the Secretary of State to post the voter file information daily, as well as a daily searchable absentee ballot file, so that people are not unnecessarily punished because they don't have the accurate information when they're trying to send out absentee ballot requests in order to help people to vote. Right now, that's all I've gotten. That's as far as we've gotten. Obviously, we'll be finishing reading this bill, probably with vodka, and I will submit the rest of my comments in writing. I yield for any questions.
Yes. What number are you representing? Representative Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you coming. We have talked to county election officials.
Yes, sir. And they've
Uh,
expressed their disapproval of
wait a
a
minute.
number of these sections.
Ma'am, I was chief registrar of Baldwin County for 16 years. Have you read the election code? Have you read the Bible?
Have I read the whole election code?
Uh-huh.
I've read a good deal of it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, in doing that for 16 years, it has been confusing. And a lot of election people have been in contact with us. Lynn Bailey from Richmond County,
Mhm.
numerous others. Randy Morrow from Baldwin County that took my place. So a lot of them are looking too. But how long did it take Georgia to report the final results of the last election?
You were within your time of certification. So I would,
No,
I-
not certification, the total results.
it took about a week.
Yeah, isn't that a little ridiculous?
No, sir, I don't think it is, because I
When all
believe
the other 49 states,
that's not
um,
true. All the other 49 states had not already done so. As a matter of fact, Pennsylvania and Georgia reported at about the same time. And part of that was because of a number of the lawsuits that were occurring. And I believe it was Arizona or New Mexico who reported after Georgia. Again, we were within the time frame of certification. Election night is not results night. And the fact that we have said this, that we've provoked this lie, that we've created a situation where people don't trust their election process because people who didn't like the results posted falsehoods, and now in triggering 80 bills that are going to disenfranchise voters.
no, ma'am. No,
Yes,
this
sir.
is-
Yes, sir. There is a Brennan
no.
Center report that's out. I'm happy to bring you a copy that proves that what you are doing will unnecessarily disenfranchise Black and brown communities. And going back to what we were saying about
Thank
531.
you. I have no
back then-
further questions.
Thank
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Representative Burnell.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I have a question for you, not for her.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Battle, thanks for coming today. We
Thank
appreciate you being here. Representative Burnell.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Is HB 701 in here? I just wanted to make sure. I thought I saw something about it, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to make sure.
I'm looking up 701 right now. You want to tell us what you understand 701 to be?
The one where, about taking over the election boards.
Yes, ma'am. That is a version of that is in here. The Senate sent us 2 bills on that issue. Those are one of the first things I started talking about is section 2,
Okay,
section 5, section 6, and section 11, 2, 5, 6, and 11.
all right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, any further questions from any members of the committee? Okay, I think that's all the witnesses that we have signed up. Thank you for coming in today, and we will stand adjourned.